Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Yeadon. I'm the CEO and co-founder with Impetus Digital. At Impetus Digital, we have built some of the best-in-class asynchronous and synchronous virtual collaboration and communication tools. We have worked with pharmaceutical companies and life science companies for the last 14 years to help them with everything from virtual advisory boards, so doing insight gathering, peer influence programs. We've been doing medical education and virtual education and everything else in between. Helping companies with investigator types of meetings. So they're actually working with payers, allied healthcare providers, physicians, patients, whoever they need to work with in a series of touch points paced throughout the year, asynchronously or synchronously, so they can work through problems, discuss ideas, innovations, suggestions to help move their brands and strategies and their tactics ahead through the years. But more importantly at Impetus, we really believe that everything starts with a conversation. And from these big, hairy, audacious conversations with some of the leading edge thinkers, the digital provocateurs, and the healthcare thought leaders, we can all work together to collectively and positively disrupt healthcare. So I'm super excited about having one of these healthcare thought leaders at the table today. Today I have actually Brad Womble. He's the Senior Director of Strategy, Marketing, and Mergers and Acquisitions at a company called Jabil Healthcare. In his role, he provides leadership in the areas of strategic planning, marketing, mergers and acquisitions, business partners, as well as joint ventures for Jabil's $3 billion healthcare division. So with over 12 years of experience working in senior business management as well as finance roles in the industry, Brad has an exceptional insight and understanding of the technology, policy, and macroeconomic forces shaping today's dynamic healthcare marketplace. So prior to joining the healthcare division's executive team in 2012, Brad held positions with Flextronics Medical. This was formerly Avail Medical Products, as well as with Roche Diagnostics and Fresenius. So welcome, Brad. So happy to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Natalie. I appreciate it. It's super excited about this topic as well. It's definitely something that a lot of us are passionate about. And, thanks for the invitation to talk about it today.
Absolutely. You have a really unique and interesting career trajectory, Brad, starting off obviously in the pharmaceutical or in the life science space and landing where you are today. Maybe we can start a little bit about how you found your role and how you ended up at Jabil.
Yeah, there was definitely several paths that I could choose when I graduated sort of undergrad. But I would say, one of the things that always really stuck with me that sort of really kind of helped choose the path for me was an interest in how population groups, how people interface with disease. One of the big areas of study that I had was around medical anthropology, and basically medical anthropology is about how did disease affect population groups over time? For instance, malaria causing, sickle cell anemia, in African populations and other populations that deal with malaria, and how, we've evolved to live with certain diseases. And so actually that really, really focused on biochemistry, and that led me into a healthcare services start. So that led me to Fresenius, where we were really focused on dialysis care for patients. And I wasn't on the product side, I was actually on the services side. So it was a really great opportunity to, interact with the patients, but then also really understand the challenges of dialysis. And it really sort of helped shape, the future that I was moving into a medical device realm. But on the dialysis side, it's kind of interesting because I know this topic is about digital health. There's a lot of things that were happening in that space that, I started learning kind of early on. There's really two types of dialysis. There's hemodialysis, which is pretty invasive. You go in for 3 hours per day for a 3-day per week kind of thing. And then there's like an at-home, version called peritoneal dialysis, and they each have their own, constraints. And so, for me, some of the insights that I gained coming out of that services arm into the device arm was really about healthcare economics, reimbursements changing, how do you reimburse to incentivize certain behaviors? And at the time, they really wanted to try to push dialysis closer to the home where it's less costly. And they thought that Medicare thought that they had created a mechanism to do that, but it didn't really work. So, healthcare economics was an area that was interesting to me, but then also advanced technologies, right? How do we take patients that have dialysis, and do they always have to be on dialysis? Could that be pushed closer to the home? And stuff like xenotransplantation, where you're growing organs to help repair a patient in such a way where they don't have to have dialysis, or 3D printing. And so that whole area of advanced technologies, as well as healthcare economics, sort of led me into back into an MBA program, and then forward into the devices space. And so that's sort of the trajectory of how I arrived at where I'm at today.
Wow, it sounds super interesting. Also looking into Jabil as a company, it's a really large company and there's a lot of arms to it. So healthcare is actually one dimension. Tell us a little bit about what Jabil Healthcare does specifically.
Yeah, sure. So Jabil Healthcare, as of really the end of September, we report healthcare as part of our packaging group. So really, roughly about $5 billion now in terms of revenue. So it's a fairly large, contract manufacturer for healthcare services, but we're really diversified. We're in medical technology market, or medical devices, diagnostics, pharmaceutical delivery systems, as well as orthopedics. So we really are fairly diversified within those different markets, but within those markets that we play, it's really end to end. So we're working on design projects. We're doing design and development work into manufacturing, all the way through sort of life cycle management of those devices. So we really help our customers innovate across the spectrum of that device within many different markets. And really sort of underpinning a lot of that are things like digital health and other services that really sort of live across those verticals, if you will. So fairly diversified healthcare group.
So Jabil Healthcare has been investing and developing and innovating in digital health for a long time. In comes COVID, and the pandemic accelerated a lot of this technological adoption. What actually happened with Jabil at that time? What were some of the accelerants, and what were some of the deterrents that happened when the pandemic arrived?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And really, sort of the digital journey was certainly accelerated by COVID, and we'll definitely get into that. But what was really interesting, to me, was really what we were starting to see with our customers. For instance, it really started when we started recognizing that of our design projects that we had in-house, about 90% of those design projects had a connected ecosystem or connected health ecosystem associated with that device. We were only really supporting our customers on the device and development side, some software development around firmware, around testing, and some other areas there, connectivity. But we really weren't supporting our customers through connected digital health platform development at that time. But that was something that we realized that our customers were taking on. In a lot of cases, we were waiting for our customers to develop that connected solution so that we could take our design and have it fit within them. So we started thinking about how do we help our customers accelerate their product to market by offering connected health solutions. But to come to your point about COVID, that really accelerated things. We started seeing a lot more projects, obviously, that were connected because they wanted to move those, say, diagnostic products, closer to the patient, so they could be done in as close to the home as possible. But then also, as part of that, we were also seeing, some of the reimbursement landscape change within healthcare as well, that our customers were taking advantage of. Changes, as you probably know, telemedicine, being able to do that remotely across state borders in some cases. And not just that, but also, remote patient monitoring. And even this year, remote therapy monitoring codes are coming on or have been published. So COVID has really sort of accelerated, this move towards taking better care of the patient closer to the home. And in my mind, really helps accelerate our industry's interest in personalized medicine and really trying to provide the right treatment at the right time.
Absolutely. Remote monitoring, but more importantly, the whole diagnostic piece is the entryway, if you will, for longer term consumer health. So this idea about getting away from sick care and much more into the realm of wellness care or preventative care. And
Yes.
so tell us a little bit about that movement and what Jabil is trying to do to accelerate that concept of moving things earlier in the process so that we are not just ending up retaliating and acting reactively to sickness.
Absolutely. To me, I know that we've talked, the industry has talked a lot about, the patient digital twin and what that means. But the reality is that, yes, it's about a patient digital twin, but it's about really, a digital twin for all of us. Yeah. Because we really want to move, these themes into preventative care as well, right? Because if we can keep people from getting sick, then, you're also helping reduce healthcare costs, in addition to helping the people, of course, that are sick. But frankly, the biggest challenge that that I've seen is really the siloed data that exists out there, and the lack of ability. I mean, it is happening in sort of microcosms within different hospital groups. But how do we unlock the silos and aggregate this data together so that we can start creating that patient digital twin, where we can really start logging in all those different biometrics and drawing correlations between how the patient's feeling versus how the patient's being measured from a health perspective by multiple devices, by the way, in a seamless way for patients and consumers to basically take advantage of. And I would say, frankly, that's one of the biggest challenges we have today is really knocking down those barriers. And that's one way that groups like Jabil Healthcare are really trying to think about that, which is how do we make access to these devices for even elderly populations that aren't used to having smartphones really easy to use at home. I mean, and let me just give you an example of how complicated it could be. So let's say that we did want to create a digital twin for a patient that's, say, 65 or 70 years old, and he has a Dexcom continuous glucose meter. He has a Masimo pulse oximeter. He has a AstraZeneca auto injector. He has a weight scale. But does he have to click on 4 different apps on the smartphone in order to load data from all those different devices? What we found was that people over the age of 65, only about 50% of them actually have smartphones. In fact, my dad, I thought he did have a smartphone, but he's got kind of a flip phone, so he would fit within that criteria that doesn't have a smartphone. So how do you make it easy for for people to access this technology? And that's absolutely what we're thinking about, and some of the things that we're developing to support that.
When you've used the word digital twin, a couple of times already, and for some people that sounds really cool. For other people, it sounds really creepy and somewhat sci-fi, and then there's people who are probably just undecided.
Yeah, yeah.
It seems like kind of an indeterminate concept or an abstract concept. Can you maybe explain what you mean by digital twin?
Yeah. And really, I kind of like to think about it in 2 ways. I like to think about a patient digital twin, but I also like to think about like a device digital twin as well. A device digital twin and a device digital thread, and I'll explain what I mean by both. On the patient digital twin side, the more data. The more relevant data, I should say, the more relevant data that we can, aggregate from a particular patient, we're able to start drawing correlations about, either patterns of behavior that affect disease or how well a patient is responding, to treatment. And we're able then to develop, algorithms or, math formulas, if you will, to be able to help, treat that patient in a better way. Now, all of this is predicated upon the patient or the consumer providing access to that data to that care provider environment, so that we can actually create that. So really that holy grail, if you will, is really that patient digital twin for all of us, right? The device digital twin, though, I do want to make a distinction there, because the device digital twin is really about 2 things. One, how well is that device health? Meaning, is that device performing in the field the way that you expected that device to perform? But the other piece of it is the digital sort of, I'll say a digital thread, which is the ability to connect in like supply chain data, data like, the components that are going into that device, the serial numbers, labels that are going on that device, label revision numbers. It could be the way it's manufactured. It could be, process parameters, things that really help a person understand how that device was manufactured. And if you have, say, sort of a digital twin of that device where you've designed it, you've tested it, you've simulated in a virtual world, you're able to link in these manufacturing supply chain elements to it, and then you're able to, monitor it on the when it's deployed in the field, that device performance side. All of a sudden, you're getting data from both sides that helps you. Number one, it helps you improve the existing device, whether it's, error codes or, firmware updates, or, if certain sensors are failing, or certain, the batteries work better with different sensors. You're able to help improve the actual sort of, design functionality of that device. But then also, customers, Medtronics and J&Js of the world are actually able to think about how to improve that device in the context of the patient, the intended, use of that device, and the next, version of that. So the combination of a device digital twin, with respect to device health and how it's used in the field, and that patient digital twin are really, two pieces of the same pie that really work in concert with each other to really capture and gather that data that we need in order to start progressing down this personalized medicine journey even further. And frankly, the thing that I really want to emphasize is that we've known about personalized medicine for thousands of years. Eastern medicine, Shu Shui was really talking about providing the right treatment at the right time. Hippocrates and Galen in ancient Greece were talking about, treating the person, specific depending upon what disease they have, meaning you treat each person differently, even though they might have the same disease. We've known about it, but we're finally getting to a tipping point, where the technology is allowing us to start implementing some of these ideas that, are thousands of years old. So it's really a super exciting time for us.
Absolutely. Such an exciting, and I've never heard the discernment between digital human twin and a digital device twin. So that's really interesting. It still begs the question, however, Brad, somebody may listen to this and say, well, why do I need a digital twin? I'm the person, and all this information is just being disseminated into an app or a data lake or what have you. So why is it that there is a need for a digital twin? What is the advantage of having a twin digitally?
Yeah, well, okay. Let me just give a personal example. So I'm wearing an Apple Watch and I'm wearing a Whoop band. We don't represent either product, so I'm not plugging
You're
in
also
any
wearing an Oura ring. You're also wearing
no. This is just a silicone wedding band,
sorry.
because the metal bands dig into you when you're lifting bars
Okay.
and stuff like that. So this is just to protect my skin from getting cut. No, so the Whoop band and the Apple Watch, they're collecting the same data. But what we've, what certain groups like Whoop and others and others are trying to do this as well. They're creating a dashboard to help you monitor your health. And let me just give you an example of this weekend. So I was at a pharma conference last week, and I thought maybe I was exposed to something as a result of that. And I woke up in the morning, and my wife and I do a workout Saturday morning. And I was like, okay, I'm really ready for this. I'm really kind of going hard. But when I looked at my recovery data overnight, based upon my sleep performance, and then also my heart rate variability, it was basically saying that, man, you got to be careful because you're in the red zone today. Even though I wasn't feeling like I was in the red zone. I mean, maybe a little different, but I didn't realize I was in the red zone. And when you're in the red zone, they're basically saying, don't go hard in the gym today. Be a little careful as it relates to that. But I guess where I'm going with that is that I wasn't picking that up myself. It was actually, this dashboard that was kind of indicating that you've got some things changing in your body that you're not quite aware of yet, that you will be, in another day or two. That's going to help you with thinking about what you should be doing that day. So with a patient digital twin, it's about providing those insights and those nuances that you may not be able, that may not be you may not be able to perceive it yourself, but it's still having an effect upon your body that if you did know, you might provide the right treatment at the right time, let's say, in the case of a treatment type of environment or a patient type of environment. So it's about those subtle cues that you can't pick up on yourself that helps you.
Yeah, no, absolutely meaningful sense there for sure. One thing that I also comes to mind as I think about the digital twin and the advantage of the digital twin. Again, if people are looking at the why behind it, I'm
Yeah,
thinking about the complexities, as you've ascertained earlier, around precision medicine.
yeah,
Now, one of the ways we go about doing that is being able to perfect the perfect concoction. Let's just say, for example, you have cancer and you want the perfect concoction of a variety of different types of, chemical entities. With the digital twin, basically a mathematical algorithm, you could actually fidget and try all of those different types of concoctions of that oncologic medicines without actually ever harming the actual biological form. Any
yes.
thoughts on that use or version of the digital twin?
Yeah, right, exactly. So, I mean, especially as it relates to moving into, nucleic medicines, genetic medicines, where you really need to understand, the different, genotypes of the patient, so that you can help arrive at a drug that's going to treat them, the best. But what's interesting though is that yes, absolutely, the patient digital twin, theoretically would be able to help that type of advancement. But when you think about that digital twin, I mean, it really goes across, all different industries and really all different ecosystems, including, devices, right? We're designing devices now. There's software systems out there like Ansys and others that literally help you create a virtual digital twin of a device, right? Where you can actually run through thousands of different simulations of that device to try to quickly, well, the whole idea is how do we help our customers get, quicker to market, right? And if you could run through 1,000 different simulations of different potential error modes as it relates to a device, and instead of actually having to build a device to run through those 1,000 different scenarios, you're able to sort of accelerate that. And then the other thing is that you're able to take that device digital twin now and compare it against reality, right? Compare it against the actual device when it's in the field. But it doesn't just stop at the device. I mean, think about a manufacturing environment, right? That's where your machines become, your manufacturing equipment has become learning equipment. How to better, incrementally learn how to build a better device because you're creating a digital twin for the performance of that particular device. So you could literally create a whole sort of connected ecosystem of digital twins that go from the patient to the device to the manufacturing environment to the supply chain, and it all sort of connects together into these beautiful web.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an exciting future for sure. Tell us a little bit about the Jabil business model. You keep talking about the customer, you talk about innovation, you talk about helping them pull through these medical devices. I'm assuming that some of these are software as a medical device. Who is the customer and what exactly is the Jabil business model?
Yeah. So, I mean, our traditional customers are what we call the original equipment manufacturers. The actual companies that are actually selling and marketing the product, to the field. So that would include, say your top 20 medical device and diagnostics customers, your top 20 pharma companies, your top 20 orthopedic companies. We're working with those customers to help develop and support their products in the field. Where we got our start though was specifically around manufacturing services, and of course today our manufacturing services is the largest portion of our business. But you can imagine that as more and more devices are becoming connected, and as more and more of our customers are generating revenue, not just from their devices, but also from the algorithms that they're developing based upon the data that they're collecting from those devices. We need to be able to support our customers across that evolution that they're going into the digital space. And the way that we do that is, obviously sticking to our foundation of being strong manufacturing, implementing digital twins where it makes sense on the manufacturing floor, in our supply chain, in the device development, but also thinking about how we might be able to support those device digital twins or digital twins as it relates to our customer supporting products even in the field, right? So it's about connecting all those dots together, and that's really sort of the journey that we've been on.
So you've talked a lot about the interconnectedness, I suppose, from a physical sense, the idea of interoperability of a myriad of different apps, digital twins, device digital twins, et cetera.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Do you foresee the day, Brad, where it sounds to me like there's an opportunity for the big super app, the one thing that brings it all together? You're working with the top 20 of all these people.
Yeah.
Is Jabil in a position to create that super app?
Well, so I think we are in a good position to really help be at a beachhead between the worlds of the care providers and our traditional customers as it relates to helping facilitate that message forward. I do think, and let me kind of explain how something like that might work. So I do feel that the care provider and ultimately the payer, and I'll explain, and we can get in, if we have time, we can get into how the care provider and the payer could work together in this node. But the reality is that all of our customers are doing a fantastic job building products that are curing diseases and addressing acute issues and chronic issues, and they're deployed to patients today. The challenge though is that when you have, say, 500 different companies that are coming out with products that have their own sort of connected sort of environments, what's really connecting all those 500 companies together? And the reason why I say that is because, you and me, if we're a patient, we might be interfacing with 4 or 5 different types of devices, right? And if they're made with, 4 or 5 different companies, are we going to be using 4 or 5 different apps for those 4 or 5 devices, or how do we make this sort of a seamless sort of situation? And I think the care providers really are at the nexus there, because if we can work with the care providers like we're doing today, we have some relationships there today. We can really use the care provider as sort of the node to connect those devices together to build those, that patient digital twin, but to also really work through how do we seamlessly architect this so that, it's really accessible to the patients. And how we think we can help with that is because we manufacture products for a lot of these different, customers that are in diabetes and, general surgery, or, respiratory, any number of different spaces. We can work with those customers to integrate that data into a hub or into a platform that makes that seamless. Work with a care provider to integrate that, into a patient's home, let's say, to start validating, some of these models. And that's exactly how we're thinking about sort of, deploying this from a big picture perspective.
Brad, it's an extremely exciting world and with all kinds of opportunities. One thing that comes to mind is thinking that there's this acceleration in technology and innovation, while at the same time dealing with infrastructure, especially around regulatory infrastructure, that really is moving at a snail's pace. So what sorts of things is Jabil doing, and or your partners, to try to talk about the regulations around the approvals and the adoption and the dissemination of these exciting new technologies in light of a fairly old legacy infrastructure?
Right. Well, I got to tell you, I mean, I do need to applaud the FDA and Medicare for what they've done over the last, well, since COVID, honestly, even before, but they really have. I mean, there's certainly opportunities to improve. Okay, so I'm not trying to say that there's not opportunities to improve it further, but with the releasement of the CPT codes related to remote therapy monitoring that came out this year, it's really enabled, honestly, some really cool business models that we see our customers starting to adapt to actually start, to continue the advancement of caring for patients, closer to the home. So those codes certainly have loosened up things a bit. Now, the areas where there's still opportunities to really improve it is we need to do our part. And when I say we, all the healthcare stakeholders need to do our part to basically prove some of these digital health business models, so that we can share that with Center for Medicare, where we can share that with the FDA and share the benefits of that. And the way that we do that is obviously we continue to work on sort of pilot programs where we show that benefit. We talk to the payers, and when the payers see that benefit, they're able to say, okay, great, all right, it's working in this hospital system. Cost savings of 30%, improvement of quality of the quality scores of the patients by 20, 30%. let's rubber stamp that into another healthcare system. You might have to do some customization, of course, to fit that particular program. That's one way of sort of scaling this effort. But then the other way on the FDA side is making sure that we're providing all the right evidence for them to make these decisions easier. And where I think the FDA has done a good job, they've created a pilot program, particularly around software as a medical device, where they've brought in industry participants, and it's not just healthcare companies, it's big tech and so forth as well, to really help sort of advance software as a medical device to really kind of push forward. And I think they've done a really good job of kind of putting that in place. We need to do our part as well as part of that as an industry.
Absolutely. You mentioned a lot about how there's an entire movement about bringing healthcare closer to home. COVID obviously was an accelerant with that. There was a moratorium on clinical studies. They were literally stopped until we actually came up with devices and methodologies and endpoints that could be incorporated with people choosing to have and participate in decentralized trials.
Yeah.
How is Jabil, or how did Jabil get involved in that and this whole idea around decentralized or hybrid clinical trials?
I by the way, I mean, I love what's happening within the decentralized clinical trial space. And by the way, this is a lot of the legacy, clinical trial groups are moving into this space as well. But there's a group of decentralized clinical trial groups that I feel are doing an amazing job. Medable, Science 37, Thread, and there's some others, but they really are paving the way for the future of the way that we look at decentralized clinical trials. And I want to go directly into that. But before I do, if we're thinking about how do we as an industry sort of prove these digital health models where we're integrating these devices into one sort of digital twin idea, I think it's going to be coming from one of two places. I think it's either going to come from some of that care provider environment, like I was talking about earlier, in terms of setting up that infrastructure in place and having that care provider be the nexus point, at least for the interim here. But then also decentralized clinical trials, because think about it, groups like Medable and Science 37, they're basically providing the conduit in order to conduct that clinical trial for the patient. And they've built incredible software to monitor that patient diaries, onboarding, telemedicine, all the things that they need to be able to record, how that patient is responding to treatment and taking the treatment, adherence, and those kinds of things. But then, the other piece of it really is about the device element of it, because it is about taking the drug, but it's also about how is that patient responding to the drug. So the other devices that might be used in conjunction with that drug. And so the way that we kind of think about working with decentralized clinical trials is let us be that device, partner for them, meaning let us manage that device in, whether it's, sending those devices out to that patient care environment, making sure that, they're seamlessly connected into the home, so that burden is kind of lifted from those decentralized clinical trial folks that are really focused on the patient specific aspect of the treatment of the study. And so what we envision is being able to take that device data, feed that back into their platform, and then they would have sort of a complete system. And that's how we envision that. But what's great about that is that all of a sudden you have decentralized clinical trials groups that are now sort of aggregating this data together, that are now sort of thinking about how this infrastructure could potentially work, even outside of clinical trials as it relates to taking care of patients in the home. So they're a canary in the coal mine, I think, with respect to how, this could really evolve. And I think that when you see, the valuations of some of these groups and the investment dollars that have gone into these groups, hell, I think Medable alone raised maybe 300 million over the last 2 years. And I think Science 37 was, pretty close to that as well. So other people are starting to see sort of the value in what they're doing.
Absolutely. I think it's incredibly exciting area and lots more to come on there. On that note about the healthcare at home, I mean, there's a confluence of things that are happening right now, part of it being a result of the pandemic. One is that we saw a large departure, if you will, of a lot of healthcare providers. So there's actually a deficiency in how many are out there. And at the same time, there's a deficiency in number of beds, et cetera, and also an aging population. So this idea about finding a bed in every home How are we going to be able to solve some of these, healthcare issues around excruciating or accelerating costs, decreasing care providers? What does Jabil see as being the opportunity around hospitals being home being the new hospital of the future?
And frankly, I think it's right for us to think that there's a potential for the home, to provide more care at the home. So I think it would be difficult to find people to disagree that there isn't value in looking at that. There was actually a McKinsey study that came out in March, where they were looking at what is this shift in care from the hospital environment, to the home going to look like. And they were projecting as much as, if I have the numbers right, it's like $265 billion of care that will shift from the hospital environment closer to the patient over the next 4 years. Okay, not over the next 10 years, but like over the next 4 years. Now, I think some of that certainly is these new reimbursement CPT codes that have come down would be part of that. But then also, the ability of certain services in the hospital moving closer to the home. But for us, and I mean, the way that I think we look at it is the only way that you're going to be able to do that is if you can make it easy to provide those services at home. And so here are the challenges. One, how do we make it super easy for patients and consumers to digest the data that they're wearing, into a common, sort of platform that can easily be distributed to the cloud? The 70-year-old patient that doesn't have a smartphone, right? How do we do that for him? And we talked about the hub idea earlier. We think that's one solution. Getting our customers to commit to allowing us to put their data on a hub with their approvals and all that is one way. But then the other thing is, eventually you will have to have, most likely, some sort of either field sort of representative or patient care technician that might need to be sort of regionally based to be able to go into the home to help them with maybe the other half of the mile of that journey of making sure those devices are connected. But this is the challenge. If you have 100 different companies that are trying to provide, say, service for epilepsy, other musculoskeletal or respiratory, and they each have their own people that are supporting, that field rep sort of idea regionally, how do we create a service offering where you can provide that type of service for that person or for that patient, but to be able to support multiple companies in multiple different disease states, right? So there's an opportunity for a service model to be developed that sort of works across different companies, that provides a service that allows those people to kind of go into the patient's homes to kind of help support them where it makes sense, but in a cost-effective sort of manner. The combination of that plus the ease of use of the devices connected to the hub idea is really, I think, kind of the two pieces of the equation that if that works well, that $265 billion that I was talking about earlier, our companies will be able to start realizing that sooner. And sorry, I know that's long-winded, but one last comment.
Yeah, because I actually just spoke with somebody who does that. Their company is called DocGo. It's almost like the Uber Eats of healthcare. So very much so.
DocGo. Yeah, I actually listened to that, and that's kind of a perfect example of that service offering. And if you get a chance to talk to some of the care providers, like talk to somebody from the Cleveland Clinic or Johns Hopkins, but one of the things that you realize that even some of these big hospital systems that in some cases do have remote, therapy monitoring programs, a lot of them still don't really have the ability to put that infrastructure into the patient's homes to be able to start taking advantage of these CPT codes that have come across, from Medicare, meaning they want to be able to take advantage of it, but because that infrastructure isn't fully deployed, they're not able to sort of, capitalize on it. So, some of the discussions we have is, with these care providers is, maybe care providers could be a customer to like a Jabil Healthcare, in addition to, our traditional, customer set. Maybe that evolves a little bit over time. So that's kind of an interesting area that we see an opportunity in.
Oh my God, we could be speaking for hours, Brad. There is so much to linger on and explore. So many exciting things happening. Certainly it'd be kind of fun to do a follow-up to see where things go in another 6 months to a year, because I'm sure the whole world will change at that point as well too. So for anybody who's interested in connecting with Brad, I encourage you to check out his contact details in the show notes below. He'd love to hear from you if you want to connect, learn more, potentially even partner. So please check that out. If you enjoyed the show, check out impetusdigital.com. These are the kinds of conversations we have with payers, physicians, allied healthcare providers, all kinds of different stakeholders. We work together asynchronously and synchronously through a series of touch points and really cool tools with our white glove service and our account directors to kind of get you to move forward, doing some neat things like this with your clinical trials or partnering or talking about digital twins. So check out impetusdigital.com. We'd really appreciate if you can like and subscribe to our channel. And also if you can leave us some feedback on iTunes, we really appreciate it. I want to thank all of you for your time today. And thank you, Brad, for a wonderful conversation.
Had a great time. Thank you for the invite. Appreciate it. Fun topic.